recording. Awesome. So, two quick reminders. There's a link in the chat. I'll put it there one more time, and then um will say this one last time. Some of you have heard it like 10 times already. This is a link to a guided notes document that you can follow along with during the webinar, and it has all of the links and kind of a roadmap of where we're going today. So I'm really excited to share that with you. Please make a copy. And you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat, and then we'll get started. So, my name's Katie Crook. I'm the director of the South Carolina Multilingual Learner Educator Network. We're really excited to welcome you to our webinar today entitled The Science of Reading in South Carolina, a Multilingual Perspective. And I'll share a little bit about our guests in just a minute. But first, just a little summary of our afternoon together. We're going to try to keep this to 1 hour. We may go over a little bit if folks want to stick around for some questions. We'll start with some introductions and then talk a little bit about what an asset-based approach to literacy with multilingual learners might look like and how that connects to the science of reading. We are going to have some nice workshop time where you'll get to work with other teachers in breakout rooms, working on a couple of tasks to help kind of illustrate what asset-based pedagogy looks like. And then we will share some additional resources with you, especially some from the Reading League, who is joining us today and co-hosting this webinar. We're really excited about that and about this new partnership. So again, my name's Katie Crook. I'm the director of the South Carolina Multilingual Learner Educator Network. We are a nonprofit organization that recognizes that bilingual and multilingual students face systemic barriers here in South Carolina and beyond due to insufficient teacher preparation. And so we offer professional development and resources here in South Carolina to help educators understand and support multilingual learners so that all students can succeed and find belonging here. And so I'm here, of course, from the South Carolina Multilingual Learner Educator Network. We also have Jen Saunders, who's our Assistant Director of Content. She's currently a middle grades reading interventionist in Beaufort with 19 years of experience in elementary, middle, high school, and post-secondary. So she's an expert. We're really happy to have her here today. I am also a former multilingual learner teacher and a PhD student in literacy, language, and culture at Clemson University. And I'll let the Reading League folks introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Audrey Goninen. I am this week the newly president of the Reading League South Carolina, and I have been on as a founding member since our beginning in 2022, and have moved from secretary and then into vice president. And so now I am here as president, and I'm so excited to be able to one of my very first events as president to be in collaboration with another organization who holds just like-minded views and goals for students in South Carolina. Our organization, the Reading League's sole mission is to ensure there's awareness and understanding and use of evidence-aligned reading practices all across our state to ensure equitable literacy experiences for all students in every classroom. So I will be able to share a little bit more about us as we move forward, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here among all of you educators. And on a side note, you may recognize me from my work with the South Carolina Department of Ed. I am taking off that hat here, and today I am here representing the Reading League South Carolina.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're so glad to be partnering with you guys. So again, there's a guided notes document. Please make a copy of it and follow along. Take notes if you like. You'll especially need these notes when we get to breakout rooms, where you'll have everything that you need there in the notes. So hopefully you enjoy that little bit of support. So getting into our topic for today, we're going to focus on three kind of foundational resources or concepts today. And you can see them illustrated here in this Venn diagram. So we're going to start with this first circle that says joint statement. So the National Office of the Reading League collaborated with the National Center for Effective Literacy to produce guidance on the areas of alignment between the science of reading movement and bilingualism by literacy research, as well as the areas where practices that are implemented under the name science of reading do not align with the scientific evidence of how English learner or emergent bilingual students learn to read. So, in some of the materials that you'll see today, you'll see this EL/EB terminology. So that's English learner or emergent bilingual. We at SCMLE usually use the term multilingual learner. Also, that aligns with what the state of South Carolina has chosen as terminology to speak about these students. So if you see EL/EB, that's English learner and emergent bilingual students. So you'll see that language in this joint statement. If you take a look at your guided notes document, there's a link to this letter, to this statement. I think it's a wonderful place to start if you're looking for guidance on the science of reading as it relates to literacy for multilingual learners. So again, this letter was written to produce guidance on the areas of alignment and the areas of misalignment between the science of reading and the the evidence, the scientific evidence that we have of how multilingual learners learn to read. And so the document begins with a few misconceptions about the science of reading movement, namely that it's not one size fits all, it's not a piece of curriculum, it's much broader than that, and the letter goes into that as well. But I want to talk for just a minute about one of the specific misconceptions. So if you want to follow along, I'm actually going to read from the second page of the document. I have it printed because I'm super old school, but if you want to pull it up in your guided notes, it's on the second page. And here's what the joint letter says. And again, this is written by the Reading League and by many, and signed by many, biliteracy, bilingualism experts as well. So in the middle of the second page, it says, another misconception of the public around the science of reading is that multilingual students are not included in the corpus of studies referred to as the science of reading. There are multiple studies that have included ML students or EL/EB students, yet it must be acknowledged that there is much more scientific research conducted with monolingual English speaking children, and that the studies that have included EL/EB students are discussed as an afterthought or not referenced at all. And so what we want to do here in the webinar, and I think what the document seeks to do too, is to lift up the research about bilingualism and biliteracy into the conversations that we're having about policy and instruction and PD and the implementation of these evidence-based practices, to have the voice of biliteracy, bilingualism research at the table. And so we also know that even if the research is there, the research is not always being translated into classroom practices. So that's another goal that we have through this webinar and hopefully through our future partnership. And I want to make one quick note, and that is that some of our state mandated professional development really reflects, unfortunately, the prior reality that multilingual studies are not always integrated into these conversations. And multilingual students, again, that's how we'll refer to them in this webinar, are sometimes referenced as struggling readers or disadvantaged. So we want to offer a different perspective. We want to offer an asset-based perspective on multilingualism that highlights their strengths, their unique skills, and to share what an asset-based view actually looks like in the classroom. It's more than just like warm, fuzzy feelings. There's something that it looks like, and that's what we wanted to talk about today. That's where the literacy competencies comes in. So if you go back to this Venn diagram, there's a circle that says South Carolina Department of Education literacy competencies. This was new to us, that the Reading League, Audrey specifically shared this document with me. And I think that we'll have a lot more work to do around this document in the future. But it's a document that outlines what teachers should know and be able to do to make sure that all students can comprehend grade level text. And so there's an entire section of this document devoted to literacy for multilingual learners. I did not know that. So this is really exciting. And we're going to be talking more about this section of the competencies today. And I'm going to give Audrey a chance in a few minutes to explain a little bit more about the competencies. But we're going to connect the competencies with that joint statement that I referenced earlier and also with asset-based pedagogy. So these three concepts or resources really come together for our talk today. And I do want to say one thing I really appreciate about the literacy competencies, one of many things, is that they not only include practices that reflect a cognitive view of literacy. So that's like the insights that we have from brain research or how our brains function. That's a cognitive perspective on literacy. But these competencies also reflect an understanding of literacy that's about it as a meaning making activity, something that we teachers and students and all of us we make meaning and think critically in community. And so we call that more of a sociocultural view of learning and of literacy. And so I find that the competencies make space for both of those perspectives, and I really appreciate that. I think specifically when we think about how multilingual learners learn to read, that sociocultural view is really crucial for understanding if and how multilingual learners are integrated socially, culturally, and linguistically into their classrooms. So all of the links to these documents can be found in your guided notes, and I'm going to pass it over to Jen.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you today, having this really exciting and important conversation. Um, when we think about multilingual learners, sometimes they are perceived as a monolith, like we have an image in our mind of who they are. But they are not a monolith. They are our fastest growing student demographic, and they bring myriad experiences, background knowledge, and cultural assets with them to our classroom spaces. They bring with them diverse life experiences, socioeconomic status, and linguistic assets. Each student's educational history is directly linked to their country of origin and life experiences. Life, or students with limited or interrupted formal education, have distinctly different needs than students with native language literacy, for example. And an older SLIFE student might have different needs than a younger one does. This is a quote that I found from Unidos US. Nearly 5 decades ago, the US Supreme Court ruled in Lau versus Nichols, the landmark civil rights US Supreme Court decision, which unanimously decided that public schools in San Francisco failed to provide thousands of non-English speaking students of Chinese ancestry with supplemental language instruction. The case established that non-English speakers were denied access to a meaningful education and that equal treatment does not mean equal opportunity. So it's absolutely imperative that we view the whole child and every individual multilingual learner as an individual student. While the case was brought on by parents of non-English speaking students of Chinese ancestry, this ruling greatly benefits multilingual learners from all languages, cultures, ethnicities, and nationalities. So civil rights law mandates that we identify the strengths and needs of each individual child and adapt our instruction accordingly. So in thinking about multilingual students as not being a monolith, I want to share some information specifically about the state of South Carolina and the multilingual students that we have here with us. So this was from the Reading League Journal in May and June of 2024. Children who speak a language in addition to English at home represented 21% of all students in 2022, with estimates indicating that MLs could represent 40% of the school-aged population by 2030. So this statistic really illustrates for me as a wow moment the urgency and great need for really targeting the specific strengths and assets and also areas of need for our multilingual students, because they're going to make up such a large portion of our student population really soon, and they already do. So as of October 2024, 10% of all students in South Carolina were MLs. representing 177 countries and 124 languages. And there are different in different places in our state that might look very different. There might be just a few multilingual students in one area and a whole lot of our ML friends in another. But everywhere, MLs are important, and we really want to dig deeply into how to best meet their needs in the literacy classroom today.
Thank you. So just coming back to what an asset-based perspective is, and I know that it might not be new to many of you, but we want to talk about reframing our conversation about multilingual learners away from their special needs or what they don't have yet. And really centering their knowledge, their prior experiences, and their existing language practices. So they're not coming to us as a blank slate. Even if they come to us and it looks like they don't know how to read and write in their home language, they're still not a blank slate. These kids are bringing a lifetime, just as many years of life experiences and perspectives as their monolingual English speaking peers. So we want to shift the conversation away from their needs and how they're struggling and how we need to intervene and really focus on the opportunity for connection that they provide, again, cognitively, socially, culturally, and linguistically. So having an asset-based perspective really centers, again, their knowledge, the experiences, and the language practices of multilingual learners. And here's another quick quote from the joint statement that we talked about earlier, that says, a student's home language is an asset that should be valued and nurtured. First of all, because of its intrinsic value. We don't want to take away or have our students have a subtractive experience in our classroom where they lose part of who they are and they lose part of their language. Instead, we want to add something to their linguistic repertoire. So their language and prior experiences have intrinsic value, and also they can be used to leverage second language acquisition and second language literacy development. And so the practices that we're going to be talking about today, in which teachers explicitly encourage students to make connections between their home language and English, benefit their language and literacy development. And I love this visual, one of my very favorites. Again, our classroom should not only respect and tolerate differences. We must have those things. We must have respect and tolerance for each other, but we need to have practices that highlight multilingualism, that normalize multilingualism, and affirm it as a gift, the gift that it really is. And we'll show you a little bit about what that looks like in a minute. So again, we're focusing on what students already know and already can do. We can't do that without knowledge of their home languages, knowledge of their home language practices, what experiences they've had in their home language and literacy, and their cultural practices as well. And if you're familiar with WIDA, if we have my ML teachers here, and maybe even some folks who are not ML teachers, our state is a part of the WIDA consortium that has produced an entire framework and assessment system around this can-do philosophy about multilingual learners know and can do. So I want to make that connection for you as well. Jen's going to show us a little bit about what's the difference between a deficit and asset-based mindset in the classroom.
Okay, so this table was created based upon a text from the Reading League Journal, and it highlights a shift in stance from a deficit mindset to an asset-based perspective when considering our ML students. It was a really wonderful article, and I wanted to summarize it in a visual way for you. So let's explore these shifts a little bit. The term multilingual learner signifies a change in perspective from viewing a student as solely learning English, what they don't have yet, to recognizing them as someone who may speak multiple language and is adding English, thereby valuing their linguistic diversity and potential to leverage all their languages in the learning process. Our goal is no longer to transition students to English, which is subtractive, but instead to sustain home languages while expanding our students' linguistic repertoire to include English, which is additive. Stephen Krashen established that the L2, or the second language, acquisition mirrors the natural process of L1, or home language acquisition, meaning that learners acquire language subconsciously through exposure to meaningful communication, rather than explicit grammar rules in isolation. MLs build upon their linguistic foundation in the L1 or their home language in order to acquire a new language. And I always tell my ML families that their language, their home language, is the language of love and connection. And stories should be shared, literature should be shared if possible. And that first language should be fostered and built at home. And at school, we focus on adding the English. In an asset-based approach, we're shifting our focus from correct use of English, only valuing one form, that academic form, to valuing translanguaging and metalinguistic awareness. And we'll talk a little bit more about translanguaging in a moment, but translanguaging is the practice of using a student's full linguistic repertoire to communicate and learn. So all of their language resources are valued in the learning process. Instead of teaching skills in isolation or language teaching, our ultimate goal is language acquisition, which is a natural subconscious process. Acquisition takes place via systematic, sequential instruction and use of the features of a student's home language. A deficit view often corresponds with direct feedback that's modal in nature. So, for example, stop, don't, fix, or change. Whereas an asset-based view utilizes query or questions or praise to give reinforcement. You might model the correct use of a grammar form or a language form and frame it in a positive and encouraging way. Lastly, a deficit perspective might separate language instruction from literacy instruction. And utilizing an asset-based perspective calls for integrating literacy and language development instruction because the two are inherently intertwined.
Thank you. So we're going to come back to the literacy competencies here for just a minute. If you have been joining, I know you've seen lots of people pop on, probably getting home from school. There's a link in the chat to a guided notes document. If you already have it open, navigate to the literacy competencies. I think we also have linked there for you this document that has indicator 2.8. Audrey, I'm going to give you a chance to just give us a couple sentences about the literacy competencies, if you don't mind.
Okay. Katie did a great introduction of this is what has been developed by South Carolina Department of Ed to support teachers in knowing what they should know and be able to do in the classroom to support reading comprehension for all students. And there are various standards to guiding those big ideas, but then also competencies listed under each one. So just big ideas, foundational knowledge around what is the evidence behind how kids learn to read, focusing in on integration of standards, curriculum, and instruction, and your practices that align. Utilizing assessments to drive instruction and to then how do we progress monitor students, understanding a wide range of literacy perspectives in terms of the environment, but also around what kids are bringing to the classroom, what do we need to, systems we need to set up in the classroom, and then thinking about the literate environment, but then also professional development for teachers. This is often very just not an unknown tool, which is great for teachers to be able to identify what are the practices that I am strong with and what are the ones that maybe I need to develop further. And under standard 2, under standards curriculum and instruction, we have indicator 2.8, which is specifically around how teachers support multilingual learners. And so Katie has an image there and certain competencies that she starred. So do you want to share a little bit
Yeah,
about
so we
start?
just pulled all of indicator pointing out onto one page. I think there's like a page break in the original document. We kind of wanted to look at it all at once. So we just brought it over and I think we've linked that for you in your guided notes document. What we did is we put stars next to all of the competencies here that we think reflect an asset-based view of multilingualism. So what we're talking about today, this is kind of like a bridge to how we make it happen in the classroom. So I'll read those on the next slide or let you see. These are all of the starred items from that document. And this first one says, no matter the proficiency level, encourage students to represent their thinking and understanding of grade level content standards. So we want to have kids working on grade level, and we might need to do that by scaffolding with the native language, welcoming students translanguaging practices, writing, drawing, sentence frames, etc. We're really excited that translanguaging is listed here in the competencies, and we'll tell you more about that. We could probably have a webinar on every single one of these items. Maybe we will. But that's the first one, and then you can see these other ones below that we feel like reflect an asset-based view of multilingualism, specifically around literacy instruction. And we were really encouraged about these practices. Again, we want to point out that these competencies encourage using students' home languages, and that shows that we understand that students' home languages are an asset to be built upon and not something that needs to be left at home. Home languages are actually academic just as much as English is. And so we want to model that for students. Another way we can do that is by using translingual text, which you'll have a chance to win a few of at the end of the session. So make sure you stick around for the end. We have some translingual texts for you guys. So I'm going to let Jen talk a little bit about this translanguaging idea, how it plays into an asset-based view of literacy, and how teachers can encourage the use of translanguaging in the classroom.
I think sometimes it's very intimidating to have so many kids in a room and maybe not be able to understand everything that's being said. So there's some reluctancy sometimes on the part of educators to allow that to take place in their classroom. But it's really okay if we're not sure what students are saying all the time, because making meaning for multilingual students means attaching their new knowledge to what they're bringing with them to the classroom. So translanguaging is this established and purposeful practice that Dr. Ophelia Garcia has established as using a student's full linguistic repertoire and a pedagogical approach in which educators support this ability. So what does that look like? To promote this practice in the classroom, educators can make space for purposeful and fluid language practices. In the book on translanguaging, I have read it as being referred to a corriente or a wave. It is fluid, like a river flows, such as language should be flowing through a classroom. So allowing multiple methods for showcasing knowledge, using native language to make connections to English vocabulary, comparing and contrasting spelling and sound patterns in a student's home language in English, which you'll get to take part in more deeply soon, sharing native language and English paired text, description of images and concepts in a native language in English, so having students share vocabulary that they are bringing with them when discussing text or images or concepts in the content area classroom. Bilingual and multilingual written and oral responses, allowing students to respond to share their ideas and learning in their home language, are all wonderful ways to welcome students' language assets into the literacy classroom. Literacy is built in English upon literacy practices in the home language. So those transfer, those skills in the L1 or home language transfer positively to the acquisition of literacy skills in English. So we want to make space for that as much and often as possible.
That's right. So what we are going to do is to talk about what it might mean to make connections between a student's home language and English. And we're going to do so at the very smallest level of language, which is at the phonemic level. So again, we can do, and I hope we'll have the opportunity to do some more professional development around the literacy competencies. We can talk about translanguaging for hours. It's one of my favorite subjects. We're going to focus today, though, on phonemic awareness and phonics instruction that can provide opportunities for cross-linguistic connection. So what we're going to do, you must pull up now your guided notes document. It's going to tell you what to do next. So we're going to get into breakout rooms for the next 20 minutes. You are going to explore a few resources that are listed on your guided notes document. That is a website called mylanguages.org. That is a resource from the Reading League called the Contrastive Analysis document. Those two resources are going to be important to explore together, but make sure your group has enough time. You have about a 5-minute video to watch together, and then you'll do a little bit of reflection. So as you budget your time, you're going to be in breakout rooms for 20 minutes. So you might spend your first 5 to 8 minutes exploring the resources, take time to watch the video, and then have some discussion around um, what connections you see between these resources and what we've talked about today with an asset-based view. So I think you're going to like this. It's going to show you exactly how to do this work in the classroom. So Audrey's going to open up our breakout rooms, and everyone should be able to find their way. Make sure you have the guided notes document pulled up, and we'll see you there. Well, welcome back, everybody. We hope you had some good chats with people in the breakout rooms. It's always nice to get to visit with people that you don't get to visit with all the time. So, a part of the breakout room asked you to write down a takeaway. So, if you have been able to write down like a sentence takeaway, or maybe it's just a phrase, if you can copy that, paste it in the chat, but don't press enter yet, okay? So we're gonna do something called a waterfall. If you could just get your little takeaway ready. So just a few words, phrase, maybe a sentence of what you experienced in your breakout room. And we'll get ready to share those in the chat in just a second and like a little waterfall kind of deal. So I'm gonna hope that you guys have that there. And then when I count to three, we're going to press enter at the same time. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. So make sure you get that copied over or typed in. And here's some little typing keys, so that's a good thing. All right, so on the count of three, let's press enter at the same time and kind of take a look at what everybody is thinking and feeling after that. So 1, 2, 3, enter. There you go. Love it. So, similarities and differences with languages that we use. We have 124 languages represented in South Carolina. So, it's important to know the languages that our students represent. Issues we all face. Yes, that's an important thing to do when we're with teachers, to talk about your needs that are specific to your context. The contrastive analysis resource is quite new. It actually came about while we were planning this webinar, so it worked out really nicely. Nice to go back to phonemes. Wonderful. That's great. All right, wonderful. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing how Dr. Carnes-Hagan connects home languages and English in a phonemic awareness lesson. This is what asset-based teaching can look like. This is one example where we're truly building on what the students already know and starting with what they have instead of assuming that they don't know or have knowledge of anything. And I hope you'll keep that video and that contrastive analysis and the My Languages website in your back pocket and even consider sharing it with the teachers at your school. We're going to look at one last thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Audrey for the remainder of the session. But on your guided notes, there's a takeaway. This is our parting gift to you. I'm sure we can talk more about this another time, but there's a document there called Differences Impacting Literacy Development. Let me see how it says on the guided notes. It says, yeah, so on item 5, letter B, take with you differences impacting literacy development. So this is, again, showing you that the way that monolingual English speakers learn how to read and the way that bilingual learners learn how to read is not exactly the same. There are some similarities for sure, and the science of reading research shows some of the similarities. but there are also some important differences. And so this document is a wonderful guide. It's a great principle, something that you can share with teachers at your school to understand the differences between these types of learners and what they need and can do in the classroom. So that's our parting gift. We're not going to take a lot of time to go over it today, but we wanted to give you something to take with you as you go. I'm going to turn it over to Audrey.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit about the Reading League, if you are not familiar with it, as I said at the beginning, our mission is to advance the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading practices across our state. And so we do that in a variety of ways. Um, and one of those is we like to hold in-person events. We have done screenings of documentaries that really highlighted the dire nature of um, literacy in our nation and then what has happened in places that they've shifted practices. So the film The Right to Read, if you've seen that ever highlighted, or a film called Hopeville. We had a fun in-person snack and learn where it was all called What's the Schwa or What the Schwa, and participants left with materials that they could use to work on teaching that schwa sound. We also do monthly second Saturday webinars with thought leadership discussions. We have researchers come, we have practitioners help share about the work they're doing in their schools. And part of that is having spotlight schools. So, schools who are making shifts towards evidence-aligned practices, we want to celebrate you. So, if that's your school, please let us know because we'd love to highlight you in the future. We also do book studies. So we have done Explicit Instruction by Dr. Archer and Seven Mighty Moves and Strive for Five, all on the oral language. And we have an upcoming one on the Comprehension Blueprint. And so for our members, we always ask the author to come, and the authors are always so great, and they come to one of our sessions. So those are some of the things we do to push forward our mission. But I wanted to share with you again some resources. Um, and I saw the note come in the chat. It is 5, so feel if you have to go, I totally understand. Um, One of the things that I want to direct you to is our website, the national website, thereadingleague.org. And within that website, there is a component called the Compass. So the Compass is a place for a variety of stakeholders to go to look for resources specific to them. And I wanted to point out 2 today. The one is the curriculum decision makers that we're going to look at really quickly, but closely in a moment. And then there's the one that's on emergent or English learners and emergent bilinguals. In the English learners and emergent bilinguals, that contrastive analysis document is there, but there's also a ton of other resources, tools, and videos of professional learning that the Reading League has provided. One of those is a video where Dr. Stanislaw Dehaene, who yes, that is the Stanislaw Dehaene from the Reading Brain. If you're taking letters, then you're aware of that. But he was sharing about the work he's doing around language development in multilingual learners when looking at the brain over with multiple languages being learned. And so it was fascinating. It is, free to access. So definitely check out the website. Because it has tons of free things for teachers, educators, and all these variety of stakeholders. The other component I want to hone in on really quickly is the curriculum decision makers curriculum evaluation guide. So this is a resource that you can utilize to lay your curriculum down next to it to say, hey, how does this align to evidence-based practices? So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, because I wanted to point out that there are components of the curriculum evaluation guidelines that are specific to supporting multilingual learners in the classroom. And so here are specific ones to phonics and phonic decoding. So ensuring that once students are able to decode words accurately, that you're using support supports to ensure that they also learn the meaning of the decoded words, and that where attention is paid to the positive transfer of letters and sounds from their home language, in addition to those explicit attention to those not present in their home language, which that contrastive analysis document really supports as well. You also want to be looking to see, does your curriculum have supports for fluency, where students are not only working on building fluency in terms of accuracy and automaticity, but also ensuring that they're understanding the meanings of the words. We have focused specifically on language comprehension, reading comprehension, and writing, and that English language development includes supports around each of those areas. And then specific to building background knowledge, does the curriculum have opportunities that are specified for building background knowledge in the student's home language, or by using visuals or clarification whenever possible, continuing to build up vocabulary. And then this is really a key one here. Assessment. Multilingual learners are assessed in their home language whenever available. And so that is a hard ask for a lot of curriculum companies. And so we don't often see that in resources out in the field. But we can be thinking about, okay, what do we need to communicate to these companies to say, hey, we need these resources. So as you leave today, I encourage you to take time to reflect, go back, access the CEG document, and then at your school with a team of teachers or coaches or administrators, really review those resources along with the CEG and think about, are these components present in your school's curriculum? If so, are they being practiced and utilized? And if not, maybe how can you support your peers in your school to utilize these practices as well? Did want to point out that the document is lengthy and there's a lot of great information. And so the Reading League has tried to support schools and districts by having teams of experts all over the nation work together to begin reviewing various curriculums that are popular in the nation. And so I wanted to pull out a few: Amplify CKLA, HMH into Reading, and Open Court. Those are all ones that have been approved in South Carolina and adopted this year. Navigation reports have been developed to explain, hey, the teams looked at the CEG, they looked at the curriculums, and these were our findings. Also, some of the resources used in the state but weren't on the adoption list, but I've seen them in schools: Collaborative Classroom, UFly, Really Great Reading. Those also have navigation reports. So if you're interested to seeing, hey, what have reviewers or found out about the curriculums as compared to evidence-based practices, you don't have to do the work yourself. You can get those reports right from the Compass and have that information. All to note, these are not around recommending. The Reading League's not recommending, oh, you should use these curriculums. It's just letting you know these are the practices that align to evidence-based practices, or they don't. Because we know all curriculum, there's never a perfect curriculum out there. There's always going to be something that we can tweak. So, at the Reading League, we believe all children can learn to read and that all teachers can learn how to teach them. We'd love for you to join us in our mission. So feel free to join us today or attend one of our future sessions. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Oh, Katie, you are muted.
Thank you. I'm excited to check out that evaluation guide. Thank you for sharing all of those wonderful resources. And then can you type the Reading League National website in the chat for folks so they can just click on it there? I'm also, while she's doing that, going to put a link to the feedback survey. So this is a chance for you to win a translingual book for your classroom. So We talked about welcoming children's translingual practices by giving them opportunities to use their home languages and to show how they are already using their home languages as they think and talk and read and write throughout the day. One way that we can welcome children's translingual practices is by modeling that for them. So there are actually some lovely books out there that we would love to share with you. And so we have a few that we'd like to give away to folks for filling out our feedback survey. So the feedback survey is there in the chat. It's going to help us understand your needs going forward around the science of reading. We also would love to stay connected with you as well. So please visit us on our website. We have resources that are just for South Carolina teachers, like the Book of the Month. We have a diverse book bank. We offer monthly virtual PDs, and we would love to have you join us. So again, if you could fill out that feedback survey for us, thank you for sticking with us for 9 extra minutes today. We appreciate it. We had to make some tough decisions about what we could or could not do in 1 hour. We just about made it. So thanks for your patience. Really good to see lovely familiar faces and some new ones as well. So if you could just complete the survey for us, that would help. We have been recording this presentation and we'll get it out too. We have a spot on our website where we post our prior PDs and we'll make sure folks get the link to what we've done today. Thank you so much for being here and we hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.